when we start to see and celebrate those little things, when we start to reframe what we're hearing, I notice parents settle down. I see parents feel a lot more confident. I see parents feel a lot more grateful for the relationship that they're building with their kids, and also to have a lot more compassion, both for their kids who are struggling and doing the best they can, coming from challenging behaviors, but also for themselves.
Yeah.
We're working, I think all of us are working so hard to show up in the ways that we think our kids need.
Yeah.
And when parents are feeling overwhelmed, I really want them to just pause and be like, wow, I'm feeling overwhelmed because I'm going a million miles an hour trying to do the right thing.
Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, your go-to guide through the beautiful, complex, and transformative journey of adoption. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through adoption consultant for over a decade, author of the Adoption Roadmap book, and your trusted guide. In each episode, we dive into real experiences, expert insights, and the raw, honest truths that you will need to navigate your journey. Whether you're just beginning, in the thick of it, or well past placement, you'll find support and community here to help you navigate this unique path with confidence and love. Adoption isn't all rainbows and butterflies. It is life-changing and worth every bit of effort. Let's learn, grow, and journey together on the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Welcome back to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, where we explore the unique challenges and joys of adoptive parenting. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Sara Cole, a seasoned parenting coach with over 20 years of experience helping families create stronger connections and more cooperative homes. As a mom to both biological and adopted children, including a transracial adoptee, Sara knows firsthand that adoptive parenting is different. Frustrated by traditional parenting guides that didn't address adoption-specific challenges, she became a self-proclaimed attachment geek, training with experts like the Neufeld Institute and Siegel's Mindset Institute. Sara's insights are practical and empowering. She believes parents are the ultimate experts for their kids and emphasizes the importance of meeting children where they're at while taking care of yourself along the way. She's also the creator of the Collect Your Kids Guide, a quick and powerful tool to build connection and cooperation in just 2 minutes. Yes, folks, in just 2 minutes. Get ready for a heartfelt conversation as Sara shares her personal journey, practical advice, and tips for helping adoptive families thrive. Let's dive in. Hello, Sara. How you doing?
Hello. I'm so happy to be here to talk with you.
Me too. Can you start by just giving us a broad overview of your connection to adoption, your family makeup, and maybe what led you to coaching adoptive parents? Let's set the stage.
Sure.
Okay.
So honestly, my connection to adoption starts with being a kid who had adopted friends.
Okay.
Right? To me, this was a way families were built. It seemed natural. It seemed normal because I had more than one friend. And they were people who were close to me and are still dear to my heart. So that was my kind of introduction to adoption.
Okay.
My husband and I we are either geeks or very intentional. I don't know which way you want to put that.
I like both.
And so we decided before we were married that we wanted to have kids, and that as part of that, we would like to use the equipment we had and have some born to kids, but also because we could see there are so many children in the world who need homes, to also adopt into our family. So that got us started on the road to where we're at. We have a son who's born to our family who just turned 24. And we have a daughter who's adopted into our family who is 21.
I love that you said use the tools that we have. That's a really good way of putting it. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, right? Yeah.
So then what made you become a coach? Like, how did, yeah.
So
Okay.
I was really clear actually in high school. Let me start that over. In high school, I swore I would never have kids. And through college, I swore I would never have kids
How'd that
because
work out?
yeah, idealism. But I didn't want to do to kids what had been done to me.
Mm.
And after I met my husband, I was like, oh, maybe this could work out. Um, and as we started thinking about starting our family, I knew I needed to do something different. I needed more information. And so I had gone to a couple of friends who I really admired the way they were parenting their kids and the relationships they had, and asked them, what are you doing? Why is this working? Why is this different than what I saw growing up?
Mm.
And they said, so Sara, there's this thing called attachment, and you're going to need to learn about it.
Okay.
So I read all the books I could get my hands on about attachment parenting in 1996, I think, which was basically the Dr. Sears books, and went into having children with this information. And then once our son was born, I realized I need to see this. I need to see this really happening. And joined a attachment parenting support group because that was what was available, and became a leader for that group. And over the years of taking on leadership and supporting more and more families, at some point, my husband said, I think maybe you should be paid for these hours and hours of conversations you're having. And so that led me to get a certificate in coaching and
I
take a more
love that.
professional approach to it.
Well, isn't that how so many of us get started, right? We learn, we get passionate about it, and then so much so that we're teaching others. And then it's like, I could make money doing this and serve lots of people. So that's awesome. I love that. Now, you alluded to wanting to do things differently, to parent differently than you were raised or than your experience. Tell me more about that.
There's a lot there.
Whatever you're willing.
Part of it is I grew up in Wyoming. It was a very authoritarian my way or the highway approach, which also is true for that generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think my parents both had parents who were in the war. They were pretty used to being approached with this life or death, obey or people will die sort of approach. And I grew up with ranch families, and so really, like, one did have to obey sometimes, or there were very heavy consequences uh, that came from that.
What do you mean ranch families?
Both of my families were ranchers.
Oh, okay.
So you don't mess around with heavy equipment, right? You don't mess around with
Mm,
horses. There are
mm,
rattlesnakes around. You got to listen.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally different life than I mean, it's cool listening to it, but I'm here. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was cool. And it was
Mm-hmm.
very strict, follow the rules, don't talk back, do what you're said. Um, and and that I'm a very sensitive person, and that
Mm,
didn't land well for my heart and was hard on me. And I wanted my kids to have the experience of being really heard, of
yeah.
being really seen, of having lots of space for their own ideas, um, for being
Well,
able to tell me about them and feel heard.
that's a really big. When do you think you realized you were thinking like this? Like that's a big thought to have when you're a kid, like to think I'm not, or to even realize that you felt like that growing up. When was the first time that you were really that idea landed with you that just what you just said, like that I have big feelings, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard growing up.
Um, I don't have a really like clear answer to that. I do remember as a kid going to other families, like play dates and staying over the
Mm-hmm.
night and being like, oh, it's easier here. Oh, there's some space here,
Yeah.
in a way that felt comfortable, but also like my normal was my normal, right? And I think we all experience that. What we grow up with seems normal. And so it was really as I was watching my friends have kids that I was talking about earlier, watching them and seeing that relationship they had with their kids, where I
Yeah.
really
Okay.
started to have this blossoming idea of, oh, I can do this differently.
I love that. When you said when you went to other people's houses and you had that realization that, oh, it's different than my house. I think about that a lot with my son because I'm a single mom when he goes to houses where there's two parent families. And I think, I wonder what that must be like for him. It's louder, there's more kids, there's a whole family. So it's just interesting the experiences that we have as children and how those roll over into how we are in our adult lives with our families, um, all of that. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting. And there's a balance in all things too, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in a family that was full of ranchers. I rode horses a lot. We
Yeah.
did interesting and creative things. So definitely also I went to other kids' houses and I was like, really? They sit and watch TV all morning long? that,
Yeah.
that didn't make sense to me. So yeah, so there's a balance there, right?
Yeah. Well, and then you also talk about, so there's parenting, right? Your biological children, and then there's parenting adopted children, children that came to us through adoption, and the complexities of that, right? That add another layer. There's so many layers in life. But you've been pretty candid about how traditional parenting guides, whatever that means, the right way you were raised, whatever you read, whatever you've seen, didn't really prepare you for the complexities of adoption.
Hmm.
Do you have a specific moment when you realized parenting your adopted child required a different approach?
I have a really specific story I tell
Okay.
about this. When my daughter was about 7,
Uh-huh.
I started having migraines.
Mhm.
And the first migraine I had no idea what was happening to me. My husband had no idea what was going on. Um, I was throwing up. I was crying. I was in intense amount of pain. Um, so we were at home. My kids just got left to do whatever while my husband was taking care of me and I was, busy throwing up and crying. And eventually, after about 4 hours, it all subsided. I kind of got myself back enough together that I could go downstairs, and I went down to check on the kids first thing off, right? Um, and I didn't find any of them initially. Eventually, I went out in the backyard, and my son, who was about 9, was up a tree because that's where he hung out. He was up a tree and he was furious with me. He was so mad because I wasn't available and dad had made lunch and dad had cut his sandwich in the wrong direction. He was just like ticked off. And I apologized and we talked about it. I offered to make him another sandwich and he was fine. Right. I went looking for my daughter and I couldn't find her for a long time. And I finally found her curled up in a tiny ball in a little corner of the couch. And I went and I put my arms around her and I said, honey, what's going on? And she said, I thought you were going to die.
Mm.
And to me, that is such a poignant story of like a kid who's born to their family that's had a good enough beginning is just pissed off. Like, hey, my sandwich got cut wrong. What's wrong with you? Right. And my daughter was afraid she was going to lose me. And it told me that that story is always running in the background. I'm going to lose my mom. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, I knew attachment was different, but I didn't understand how deep those roots go and how attentive I need to be to them.
Yeah. Wow. And again, that you had the foresight to make that distinction is pretty remarkable, because most people wouldn't.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd had a lot of training. I knew what to look for.
Yeah,
Right?
well,
Yeah.
and good thing, because most people would say, "Oh, that why would you think that?" And just kind of blow it off like it's nothing. And therein lies the nuances of new parents through adoption who maybe don't have biological kids also, or maybe they do, who wonder, is this just a normal parenting thing, or is this an adoption thing?
Mm-hmm.
And we struggle with that a lot as parents. And in one way, well, what's the difference? You're going to deal with this anyways. On the other hand, kind of like what you said, it goes so much deeper
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
just a one time, let's deal with this and move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add in that I think it's actually way more complicated than that, because we have the born into the family kid or the adopted into the family kid. We
Yeah.
have developmental stages,
Right.
right? Then
Yeah.
also we have personality,
Mm-hmm.
and we have sensitivities, and intensities. So my son is super, super, super sensitive. Um, and so I'm trained to like handling things delicately, especially when he was little, just to get him through the day. But my
Mm-hmm.
daughter is sensitive in a different way. Just as a human, she's sensitive, and she's really intense. She
Yeah.
is the sunshine when she is happy, and she is an absolute storm when she's not happy, right? And so add that to trying to suss out what's adoption related, what's developmentally related. Are they teething if they're little, right? Are they sick? Did they have a fight with a friend? There's so many pieces in any given moment, in any given day, that it's hard to suss out what's what, and also keep an eye on the bigger picture of what's going on developmentally and how is our relationship right now.
Yeah. Well, talk about the complexities and the layers upon layers with adoption that we all deal with. Your daughter is also transracial, or she's also a different race than you. You're a
Yes.
transracial family, right?
Yeah, she's African American.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So not only do we have this attachment um, theme going on, but I know that you said somewhere that you initially believed that having diverse group of friends would be enough to support your daughter's racial identity.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then you said, maybe it isn't. Maybe that's not enough. So, where did you change your perspective on that? And what do you now believe is essential for adoptive parents of transracial adoptees?
When we started our home study way back in the day, uh, the take from our adoption agency was, oh, some other brown people, they'll be fine. Um,
Mm,
when my daughter was, well, she was highly verbal very early. When she was 2, we were on an elevator going from one floor to the next, and an African American woman got on. And my daughter said, "Oh, your ancestors are from Africa, like mine." And I had this moment of, okay, I need to be paying a lot more attention to this, because she's reading and seeing more than the literature that I was exposed to was telling me that she saw.
mm,
So we ended up going to PAC camp down in California, which was
yeah.
really helpful for us. It was a
Mm-hmm.
place for people to tell me the truth as a white mom living in a majority white city, um, what I wasn't hearing or seeing elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the things I learned is that, yeah, it's great to have a diverse group of friends. And for living in a majority white city, we do have a pretty diverse group of friends. And my daughter needed a space, a community of other African American people that she looked like, that could share her culture with her, that would help her feel seen, that could help her learn to navigate the world as a Black woman in a way that I, as a white woman, am never going to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. For those people who don't know what PACT is and what the PACT camp is, can you just explain that?
So PACT is an organization that was started by two white women of transracially adopted kids, who also realized, oh, our kids need more than we are giving them. And so they created an organization to help support adoptive families. They have a website with a bunch of amazing resources. They've started doing webinars since the pandemic that are fabulous.
Yeah.
And then they host two camps now. There just used to be one down in the Oakland area. And it has been so helpful to so many families. They started one on the East Coast as well. And it's a week-long camp where parents are in seminars to learn what we don't know as white parents. And kids are in groups where they're sometimes doing playing, sometimes they're learning a little bit more about navigating race and racial incidents. And then they talk about adoption a lot too.
Very cool. We'll link to that in the show notes. PACT is great, and we often share some of their stuff. So thank you. So now, okay, so now you're navigating this attachment thing. You're navigating this transracial theme here. Let's go back to attachment for a second, because I know you call yourself an attachment geek. So what does attachment mean to you, and what does an attachment geek look like?
An attachment geek might look a little crazy to a lot of people.
Crazy is good.
Yeah. I have my own freak flag that I fly. So,
Love it.
um, to me, attachment means the connection between two people,
Mhm.
the relationship. Attachment is bigger than that. Attachment is two molecules clinging to each other. It is the Earth and the other planets in the orbit of the sun with gravity as the attachment. Um, and attachment in humans starts when a child is just those little cells joining together and implanting in the womb. That is attachment right there. And it grows and develops through those first 9 months, or doesn't grow in development, which is a lot of what we as adoptive parents
Mm-hmm.
are dealing with, right? Did our kids get those
Mm-hmm.
things they needed at the very beginning?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an attachment cycle that happens in the first year. There are stages of attachment that happen over the years. And to me, attachment is everything. Because if we don't have a warm, caring, safe relationship with our kids, we don't have a foundation to parent from.
Yeah.
But also, if they don't feel loved by us, they don't have a safe place. Yeah.
For sure. Can you tell us a little bit, just broad strokes, about those stages of attachment? Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Shopping for the right hair and skincare products can be tough, especially for multicultural or transracial families. That's exactly why Kate Shanahan created Sweet Peachtree Marketplace. When Kate and her husband adopted their daughter, she realized that caring for her melanin-rich skin and beautiful curls was essential to raising a confident girl. And as a cancer survivor herself, chemical-free ingredients were a must. She wanted one place with safe, natural products for her whole family, plus education and resources for families like hers. Now you can find it all at Sweet Peachtree Marketplace. Just visit sweetpeachtree.com, and because you're a listener of the Adoption Roadmap podcast, if you use code ROADMAP10, you'll get 10% off your first order. sweetpeachtree.com with the code ROADMAP10 for 10% off your first order. Sweet Peachtree, celebrating every curl, every shade, every family. For sure. Can you tell us a little bit, just broad strokes, about those stages of attachment?
Yes. I'm hesitating a little bit. There are so many different ways
Okay.
that people describe stages of attachment. I've seen one that has 37 stages in the first 6 years,
Oh,
which
it's a lot of stages.
very academic. It's very specific. No parent ever is going to remember them.
No.
So the stages of attachment that I have found to resonate the most and be the most useful as a parent come from Dr. Gordon Neufeld.
Okay.
Um, and he has something called the Neufeld Institute. He was
How you studied under him. Okay.
yeah. The way I tell the story, I ought to check this out with Dr. Neufeld again. The way I tell the story is he was a University of British Columbia professor teaching about attachment and development.
Mhm.
And he found that his classes were filling more with parents from the community and not, well, and the students at UBC couldn't get into the classes. So he realized, oh, I need to take this developmental science and translate it and deliver it to parents so they can use it in their everyday life.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and he's lovely. He's amazing. He looks a little bit like Santa Claus, and he's everything I would ever want Santa Claus to be.
Awesome.
So he talks about the six roots of attachment. And they're meant to follow the first 6 years of life in sort of an ideal situation, as if any human these days came into an ideal situation and had an ideal childhood, right?
Uh-huh.
So one of the things I love about attachment and development is it's not, this happens in year one, this happens in year two, this happens in year three. It is a process. And so it's never too late to grow up. And for us as adoptive parents, I think that's very hopeful, because as we're thinking about these roots of attachment, we can think, okay, well, I have a 4-year-old that isn't quite where a 2-year-old should be yet. And I can help create the conditions that they can grow and develop and deepen their attachment to me. So the first stages of attachment, if you think about a tiny baby, are about being with, togetherness. So it's really sensory based there.
Mm-hmm.
Can they smell us? Can they feel us? Can they hear us? We have proprioception. Different people have different proprioceptions. What does it feel like for them to be moving with us? Then as a baby grows and develops, they start to creep and crawl and like move out on their own, right? So nature couldn't depend on proximity to keep these little creatures dependent and alive. And so the next stage is being like. And 2-year-olds, 1 and 2-year-olds are just such mimics of what their parents are doing, right?
Yeah.
So, and Montessori captured this beautifully, where she's created a whole preschool system based on little kids doing what the adults around them would do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My son at this age, when he was about 18 months, he had to wear a baseball cap at all times because his daddy wore a baseball cap. But also he had this giant head and these little arms, and he would knock it off all the time. So he was forever asking adults to put his hat back on for him. And about the same age, I was wearing lipstick and I had a hat I wore, and my daughter would go get my hat and put it on, and she couldn't quite figure out what you do with lipstick, so she would just eat it.
Oh.
But, she was trying to be like mommy. She was driven to do what mommy was doing. As kids kind of move into that 3rd year of life, they start to be a lot more independent, able to go out. They might go out with grandma and grandpa. They might go to play dates. They might go to preschool for a little while. And so nature can no longer depend on being the same as to keep that attachment to mom, to dad, to, any primary caregiver. And so it moves to belonging and loyalty. This is my house. This is my car. This is my dog. Mine, right? Kids that age are just so, and they're hoarding, like they have all of the train cars and they're like, they're mine.
Yeah. They cannot share one of them.
No. And loyalty is the other side of that, which is I am loyal to my family's values. I'm loyal to my family's rituals. I'm loyal to my family's routines. So when my daughter was about this age, we had a mother's helper, and I was getting ready for a meeting, and my mother's helper was trying to get my kids get ready for bed. And I could hear my daughter yelling, "That's not how you put toothpaste on the toothbrush."
I
So
still
she
say that to my son. He's 13. I digress.
Yeah. So we're loyal, and you know what? You learned that from your parents. You are loyal to that ritual, you are loyal to that routine, right? And it really takes root in us. Um, so belonging and loyalty, they feel a sense of ownership, but they also feel like they belong. And the next stage that comes after that happens around 4, where little kids look around and they realize that they can't own everything. And in particular, they can't own mommy and daddy, or mommy or daddy. And they watch us and they realize that we hold near what we hold dear. And that creates a longing for significance. They want to matter most. And it's when you start to hear, "You're the best mommy," or "You're the best daddy. This is the best dog," right? I have a longer story, but I'll shorten it to say that I had lost my wallet when my son was about 4.5. And it had all of my stuff in it. And there was searching high and low for a whole week looking for it. And eventually, on a Saturday morning, my daughter reached into the toy bin and pulled out my wallet.
Oh,
And I was so relieved. I threw my arms up in the air and I said, "Rosie, you are my hero." And my son came screaming across the room. It started hitting me and kicking me and crying and wailing. And he finally said, "I wanted to be your hero." So at 4.5, nothing could hurt more than somebody else being mommy's hero.
Yeah.
So that it's much more poignant. It's much more vulnerable. Being near somebody, being the same as somebody, belonging and loyalty as the same as somebody or different from somebody, those are pretty shallow, right? I can be on the bus and I'm in proximity to somebody. I can be a football fan like somebody else. But if somebody's a basketball fan, that doesn't really hurt me. I can love the Denver Broncos and everybody else in Seattle can love the Seahawks and we can still be friends, right? But when I want to matter most to somebody and they don't care, that hurts, right? So we have being close to, we have being the same as, we have belonging and loyalty, we have mattering most to. Somewhere around 5, most kids start to give their hearts to their parents, to love them. And that's when we start to see lots of hearts on drawings and "I love you." Dr. Neufeld says this is when kids decide they want to marry their parents, because they've looked around, and if you want to keep somebody, you marry them, right? Which I much prefer to Freud's explanation of the whole thing. So there's giving their heart to, and then somewhere around the age of 6, there's a change in the brain, and kids actually start to realize that we don't know what they're thinking, and we can't see all the time what they're doing. And so they have this
where
moment.
the trouble starts.
Yes, it is. It's also where the opportunity starts, right? Because they get to choose.
Right.
Do I share myself with my parent or do I not? It's called psychological intimacy. Neufeld calls it sharing secrets. And psychological intimacy is what is really the deepest root and the longest lasting foundation for attachment. For instance, my son, who is in college, he can be on the East Coast having a hard time and call me and tell me about him. And he feels heard. He feels taken care of. He feels loved. So he can be anywhere in the world. And my attachment can be feeding him and providing for him. If he were stuck at the level of sameness or belonging and loyalty, I wouldn't be able to nurture and love on him from a distance as well.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Really fascinating. Thank you for that. All this kind of lends itself to what you've talked about, collecting your kids by reading their cues and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
Can you share more about what collecting your kids means and how it's transformed your relationship with your kids? I know you sent me your Collect Your Kids guide, and I loved it. I love this idea of even like letting them hear you, meeting their eyes, getting a smile from them. It was really cool. But could you explain that for our listeners?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Again, this is something I learned from Dr. Neufeld. I've learned a ton from Dr.
Yeah,
Neufeld because he's taken all this developmental science and made it usable, right?
I love that you're
So
sharing it. Yeah.
thank you. um, so collecting is getting their eyes, their smile, and their nod.
Eyes, their smile. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the point is to collect their intention, collect their attention, collect their relationship, get them pointing in the same direction we're pointing in. And what it does is it then allows us as parents to be in the lead.
Okay.
So again, I really wanted to parent differently than I was parented. And the way I was parented was somebody would yell up the stairs and say, hey, you better do this right now, or something bad's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I learned from Dr. Neufeld was to go to my kid, get next to them, notice what they're noticing. An example I often give is my son playing Legos, because he really played Legos and he would be totally absorbed, right? And so I would go and sit next to him, notice what he was building, talk to him a little bit. So I was there with him. As soon as I started noticing what he was building, he was interested in me too, right? Because he
Yeah.
liked being seen, and I would start to get his eyes a little bit. And then I could admire something he built. This is clever. This is creative. How did you think of that? And then he's smiling, because who doesn't love a compliment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've got his eyes. I've got his smile. Did you think of this yourself? Wow. So now he's smiling. He's nodding. He's connected to me. He's feeling good about me. And then I can say something like, hey, could you come down and set the table? And
All in a
I've got
few
eye smiles and
minutes.
nods, right? Of course, mom will come
All in
set the
2 minutes,
table.
like you said.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
so simple. And yet we make it so complicated by wondering, why isn't our kid listening to us?
yeah.
Because
Simple is not easy, though.
no. If it was, we'd all be perfect parents.
Right,
Because a lot
right,
of us know what to do. It's just easier to yell down the stairs and say, honey, stop what you're doing and
right.
come do this instead. Whereas if you could just get a simple eyes, nod, and smile, they'd be way more apt to do the thing that you want them to do.
Yeah. Yes. And I want to give us all credit too. We're doing what we were taught to do, right?
Sure.
It's even what you see
Yeah.
on television, right? Like, this is how we're told directly or subtly to parent. And so doing something different can be really challenging. And then remembering to do it is extra challenging, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you're also a fan of mindfulness, which I think all of this plays into, and kitchen timers to help parents really stay present and implement what we've learned. Is there a specific mindfulness exercise you? Oh, let's see it. Let's see your. If
I
you're
always
watching
have
on
a kitchen
YouTube.
timer nearby. This is my little strawberry timer.
Oh, it's so cute. If you're not watching on YouTube, Sara has this little strawberry. That's her quote unquote kitchen timer. That's adorable. So do you have a mindfulness exercise you can take us through or tell us about?
Well, let's talk about this in two different ways.
Please. Okay.
One is I keep these timers near me, and now my phone has, I
Yeah.
think, unlimited numbers of timers
Yeah.
available to me. Um, because when I'm trying to do something different, I'm not going to remember. So I need help. I need systems. And when I first started learning to collect my kids, I actually set a timer for an hour. And every hour, I would go and collect them, just see if I could get their eyes, their smile, and their nod. Not necessarily to ask them to do something, because kids are pattern recognition machines.
Mm.
And if every time I collect my kids, I then ask them to do something, pretty
Yeah.
soon I would walk in the room and they'd be like, "What do you want?" So, in just a way of
Good
how
point.
do I warm up this relationship? How do I get them feeling how much I care about them, how
Mhm.
much they matter to me? So I will offer a challenge to clients who are just starting to work with me. So you're home for 3 hours tomorrow afternoon. Set a timer. Collect them 3 times. See how it goes. Right. And it's
Right.
every kid is different. Every parent is different. This kind of circles around to that we are each the expert in our own children. What my son needs to be collected is really different than what my daughter needs to be collected. I actually will collect my husband as well. I collect the family dog. Everybody needs something different. And what I can do to collect my kids is really different than what works for my husband.
Oh my God, if you're listening and you take on this challenge, we definitely want to hear from you. So either comment in wherever you're listening from, or email Sara. How can they reach you?
Sara at saracoleparentcoach.com.
And Cole is Cole. We'll link that, or I'll link my email address too. We definitely want to hear how that went, and if you did it. Also, how can they get their hands on the Collect Your Kids guide?
Oh, yes, it's on my website.
Okay,
So
great. We'll link that.
they can go to my website. It's there, it's just right there on the front page. It says get my guide here free. And Sara has no H, so it's Sara.
What's your website?
saracoleparentcoach.com.
Okay, perfect. I didn't
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah.
I didn't
You
want.
know, the other thing I would say is even if people aren't currently parenting, they can practice this on their sweeties. I have clients who've been known to practice it on their bosses because things go better at
Yes.
work if your boss feels connected to you. People do it with their pets. Cats, a little tricky, but the dog definitely. So,
Yeah, I'm always asking for for her eyes.
yeah, yeah.
I can't always get her to smile though the way I want her to. And
The little tail wag.
ever since you've been you talked about the stages and not wanting to grow up, all I want to do is have a little music break and sing "I won't grow up." I don't want to be a whatever.
Yeah.
Do you remember that from
Oh, yeah.
Peter
From Peter
Pan?
Pan. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so you believe that ultimately parents are the experts on their kids, and I couldn't agree more. But so many parents feel so overwhelmed or unsure that what they're doing isn't the right way, or look elsewhere for advice. How do you help parents rediscover their confidence and so that they can trust in themselves?
Yeah. That's a really huge question, and
Yeah.
it's a challenge that I think we all face. Um, I don't know if y'all watch the Great British Baking Show. I find it such a useful way to think about parenting sometimes, which is in the Great British Baking Show, they have 3 challenges in each season or in each
Episode.
episode. And the first one, they come in knowing what they're going to make. And they make it and it gets judged. The second one is called the technical challenge.
Okay.
And they're given, they have their table with ingredients and it's covered with a cloth. And when they take the cloth off, they're told what they're going to make. And when they take the cloth off, they have their ingredients and then they have just the most bare bones instructions like make the dough, make the custard, bake until done. right? And what I've noticed over the years of watching this show is the people who've made it before do pretty well. The people who've seen it in a shop window, they're probably going to pull off something that is edible and kind of gets some appreciation from the judges. People who've never seen it before, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know if it's supposed to be tall or short, what kind of texture. And you'll see them like looking out of the side of their eyes at other people's tables, trying to figure out what they're doing. And I think as parents, we often find ourselves in that here's the technical challenge, and I've never seen this thing before, right? People tell us, talk to your kids about this in a developmentally appropriate way. How do we know what a developmentally appropriate way is? And I've been hearing more and more, well, you just need to set firm boundaries with your kids. And regularly I hear parents say, what does that even mean? Right? So when I talk to parents and they're feeling overwhelmed and they're feeling like they don't know their kid and they don't know what to do, the first thing I always do is I teach them to collect their kids, because when that relationship is warmed up, things get easier, but also parents are able to see their kids better. And one of the next things I do is we talk through what every human needs, what their kids got and what they missed, no matter how or when they joined their family through adoption. You know, what happened in utero, what happened in the womb, what happened when they were born. Did they move into your family immediately? Did they not move into your family immediately? Were there medical issues? Are they a super sensitive kid? Did they have colic? Like, babies can take in or not take in the love that's offered, sometimes based on medical issues, the level of stress they're having, if they're going through substance withdrawal. There's a lot that can be offered, but they can't take in. And that just having that conversation is really eye-opening for parents. It can be painful, right?
Sure.
To see what our kids that we care so much about did get or did not get, even when we were standing guard. And when their eyes are open, when they can see their kid, when they can see what root of attachment their kid is at, they start to respond differently, naturally.
Yeah.
Neufeld says the number one determiner of what we do is what we see. If I see an entitled, spoiled brat, I'm going to come down hard on them. If I see a kid who's afraid they're going to lose their mama, who didn't have enough as a baby, who's always striving and afraid, I'm going to respond really differently.
Yeah.
Right? So helping parents see their kids differently. And then my experience is that parents immediately start to shift how they respond, shift what they're doing. And then it's just a conversation of celebrating those wins. Wow, look at you. This feels like a tiny step, but see how much progress you're making.
So important.
So important. And then celebrating the shifts in their kids. And sometimes it's hard to see. I had somebody the other day come to me and they were upset because their daughter was screaming horrible things at them. But when we talked about, well, what are these horrible things? What we realized is, oh, she's talking about what's really going on inside of her. She's talking about her deepest truths. And she's doing it in a very immature way, by screaming and kind of dumping. But she's an early teen. They don't have a lot of skills. In an adult, what we would love to see is, hey, I'm having a hard time and I really love to tell you about these deep feelings that are driving me. But, she's a teen. So what she's got as a tool is, I'm going to scream at you.
Right. I'm going to be angry.
Yes. And so when we start to see and celebrate those little things, when we start to reframe what we're hearing, I notice parents settle down. I see parents feel a lot more confident. I see parents feel a lot more grateful for the relationship that they're building with their kids, and also to have a lot more compassion, both for their kids who are struggling and doing the best they can,
Mm-hmm.
coming from challenging behaviors, but also for themselves.
Yeah.
We're working, I think all of us are working so hard to show up in the ways that we think our kids need.
Yeah.
Um, and and when parents are feeling overwhelmed, I really want them to just pause and be like, wow, I'm feeling overwhelmed because I'm going a million miles an hour trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Do you think all of our children that came into our families through adoption experienced loss and grief?
Yeah, I do.
Is there a way, or is there anything in particular that you have done to help your own child through that? I don't know if they maybe navigate that, because I don't think you overcome it necessarily, but navigating it.
Yeah. There's a lot I've done. I don't know what lands. My kids are in their early 20s right now.
Right.
We're in the phase of, wow, mom, you screwed up, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and let us stop and pause for a second and let you know very strongly and very firmly that you will screw up. There's no getting around it. You are a parent, and that's what we do best. We screw up. We
right?
love hard, but we screw up.
Yes.
It's just a matter of how much we screw up, right?
Well,
Which sometimes we don't know until our children are in their 20s and let us know.
right. Right. Well, and I first of all, we're human,
Yeah.
right? We're
Yeah.
always going to be human. You don't have a choice. So we're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be healthy for our kids if we were perfect parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I actually think what's important
Phew.
is, yeah, when we screw up, what really matters is the repair. I made a mistake. I go back. I acknowledge it. I make an apology.
Yep.
I make amends.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of the process of parenting in general, but I also think it's part of this stage of parenting young adults is they are for the first time able to start making sense of their childhoods. I mean, they're out of childhood, first of all. They're out of childhood and they're starting to make sense of it and they're seeing it differently. And so as parents who are showing up again and again and again for our kids, hearing that, making space for that, um, and taking responsibility for our part is how we show up for the relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And part of that is looking at ourselves, right? I
Mm.
often tell our families who just adopt that, now your journey is shifting to being the best, the parent you can be for your child. And you chose adoption, and you might get triggered with things, and you got to own what's triggering you and why, and look at that and look inside. You call it working on your own junk, right?
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Or your junk or your stuff. Yeah. And all of this to me all
yeah,
falls under this grief and loss umbrella.
sure.
I think our kids aren't the only ones that are dealing with grief and loss.
Yes.
I think as we parent, I wish if I could offer anything to adoptive parents, I would offer them before their kids join their family, like a totally resolved childhood, right? I don't know how we do that. A magic wand. I don't know. There's not enough therapy in the
Oh, you
world.
mean
So
before we die or before we become parents? Because,
before,
oh, Sara.
yeah, because those little kids are so good at pushing our buttons,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Any unresolved grief, loss, heartache we have, they're going to push those buttons. And like you said, we're going to react. So being aware of our own grief and our own loss, I have a lot of grief for the fact that adoption is even needed in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all experience loss as adoptive families of shared culture, sometimes shared genealogy, shared race. There are so many, even tiny little losses that we experience regularly. And so being able to take up a relationship with those, talk about some of them that aren't directly connected to our kids, like,
Yeah.
I actually think pets are a fabulous thing because, in part, they die. And so being able to model a funeral for a betta fish and saying some things and missing the betta fish and talking about what the betta fish meant to us, right? So, how are all the little ways that we can make space for grief and loss in regular life about little things, so that at times that when we need to acknowledge the grief and loss for the big things, there's skills, there's practice, there's already conversation there.
Wow. An amazing golden nugget, as I call them, that is. I think that's a great place to like bring this to a close. Um, but yes, I mean, you're so right about all the grief and loss. And I often think about how different my son and I are because we're not the same biology, and we grow up, for those of us who thought we might get pregnant and have our own child or children, how they'll be like you. Like for me, instance, I grew up on the stage. So it was always, when my child's on the stage, well, my child is so far from ever stepping foot on a stage. Um, and that is, it sounds so silly, but those are the types of things. It's like letting that go.
Mhm.
That's that grief and loss, those tiny things that you're like, oh, that's silly. I've had bigger grief and loss. We all have certain little ones and big ones, and
Right.
just being able to look at that. Um, First of all, thank you. This was a wealth of knowledge. And I know that especially a lot of our new parents who are listening are going to walk away with a lot of golden nuggets from you. I want to do a little bit of a rapid fire before I truly bring this to a close, if that's
Okay.
okay. I
Yes,
think.
and I'm aware we didn't talk about mindfulness, and I love mindfulness. So
Oh,
I'm
please. Do you want to come back to that for a second?
yeah, let's come back to
Yeah.
that for a
Okay.
second. So there are lots of ways out there in the world to do mindfulness. They're all over. And I find as a parent, what we need are quick and easy ones,
Yes.
really short things,
I
right?
thought you already
Especially,
gave us some good mindfulness stuff, but let's have more. Yes. I'm all for it.
especially as our kids are ramping up or we're ramping up, how do we get present back in the moment again?
Hmm.
So a simple one is just checking in with how am I doing? And I want to give you permission as parents to check out from your kid for a second,
Amen.
right? Like they
Yeah.
can be having their tantrum there. If you can calm yourself, then you will be way more available to parent your kid through what they're struggling with in the moment. So you don't have to leave the room, but you can kind of create a bubble around yourself and be in your own bubble for a minute. So simply going through the five senses, what am I hearing right now? Yes, I hear my kid scream, but I can also hear a bird, right?
Mm.
I can hear somebody flushing the toilet in the other room. Just like, what am I hearing? What am I feeling? Okay, I feel my feet on the ground. I feel my hoodie wrapped around me. I can feel the cool breeze coming in through the window. Um, what do I see? It could be visually, what am I looking at right now? Okay, I see the trees out there. I see the sticky note on the wall. I see the sandwich on the floor in front of me. If your eyes are closed, just noticing the little floaty things and where are the lightnesses and where are the darknesses. So what do I hear? What do I feel? What do I see? What do I taste right now? And what do I smell right now? And smell, I think, is a really interesting one because our sense of smell goes directly to our midbrain, and our midbrain governs emotion. So concentrating for a second on what I smell can really help pull us back into the present. So what do I hear? What do I feel? What do I see? What am I tasting right now? And what do I smell? And it can be that fast, and it will help shloop you back into the present moment. Um, so that's one I like.
I love that. Do you really have a
Another,
sandwich on the floor in front of you?
I don't right now,
Okay.
but thinking about, the tantrums and somebody threw their plate and
Okay.
yes, no, I don't even have a dog on the floor in front of me right now. Um, Another one that I have found really helpful over the years when my kids were having a hard time is the idea of doing some simple math. Uh, our our left part of our brain is the logic part of our brain. It's the math part of our brain. Our right part of the brain is our creative brain. It's also our emotional brain. If our kid's getting amped up and we're starting to get amped up, we want to draw ourselves back towards the left part of our brain, and numbers do that. So the two tools that I have used over the years for that is, first of all, say my social security number in my head, right? I'm not
Oh my
sharing it
God.
with anybody.
That's
Uh,
so funny. I didn't. I was thinking 2 + 2 is 4. 4 + 4 is 8.
Social security numbers, I
Okay.
think they make us feel grown up, right? They root us in our grown upness, and they're random numbers.
Yeah.
So just saying our social, I can't even count the number of times I've said my social security number in my head.
And it
Um,
has a rhythm to it too, which
yep,
is okay.
yep. I also used to say my credit card number to myself in my head because it
Oh, that's
changed and it's a
changed.
long number.
I know
But
that.
then I had a lot of ease with using my credit card number, and I decided I didn't like that. And then, yes, simple math. Doing the 2 times table, doing the 3 times table, depending on how elevated you are. Like 2 times 2, maybe like, okay, it's 4. Okay, 2 times 3. Okay, it's 6. But at times when I've had kids who were really escalated, I have worked on the 17 times table. Okay, 17 times 2.
That's above my
And
pay grade right there.
Yes, I have a degree in French language and
Oh,
literature, and so that's really math is really challenging for my brain, but it really pulls me into the present. It really pulls me into that logical part of my
yeah.
brain, and then I show up differently with my kids.
Wow. I love it. Thank you for pulling us back there. Those are great. All
Thank you.
all of it is great. Um, all right, I want to give a shout out, and you've kind of already done some of these rapid fires, but we're gonna try it again. So, give a shout out to one person or organization that has influenced your adoption journey or the work you are doing in adoption.
Oh, Dr. Gordon Newfield by far has changed how I see the world
Mm.
every moment of every day.
What's one piece of advice you would like to share with adoptive parents or hopeful adoptive parents?
Right now, the thing I'm holding for adoptive parents is that it can be really hard, and it's a huge systemic challenge that's going on through the whole country. And so you signed up for a marathon, and you need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of your body. You need to take care of your heart. You need to have places to laugh and play and cry. You need to get enough sleep and you need to eat well.
Besides getting through whatever you're bringing into parenthood from your own childhood, what's one thing you wish every adoptive parent knew before they brought their child home?
I wish that adoptive parents knew that it's going to be hard and it's going to be okay.
Describe adoption in 3 words.
Love comes home.
Adoption is not just a destination, it's a journey filled with love, resilience, and growth. Wherever you are on this roadmap, trust in your path, stay open to learning, and always lead with your heart. You already have everything you need to create a beautiful story for your family. And when the road takes unexpected detours, I'm here to help you navigate every turn along the adoption roadmap. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, you know what to do. We'd love a 5-star review and any kind of feedback you have for us. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.